The Department of Basic Education says it's well on track to eradicate pit toilets in public schools by the end of March next year. During an oral reply in Parliament on Wednesday, Minister Siviwe Gwarube told the House that she has made the eradication of pit toilets a priority for the 7th administration, committing that the department will complete its work by the end of this financial year. Minister Gwarube joins us this evening for more on this. Good evening, Minister. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So we all know the need to eradicate pit toilets is not just about dignity. It's first and foremost about safety. We have for years reported on horrific drownings of pupils in pit latrines across the country, and you have now told Parliament that you're well on course to complete or eradicate these pit toilets by March. Talk to us about this.
Good evening, Fundo, and good evening to your viewers. Absolutely, you are spot on. The presence of pit toilets 24 hours into our democracy is not just about the safety of learners. Of course, we've seen many learners drown in pit toilets in tragic incidents. But this is not just about the safety. Of course, safety is a huge part of the priorities I've set for the 7th administration. But it's also about dignity, not only just dignity for the learners, but it's also dignity about the educators, the staff in the school. The reality is that you want to make sure that the people who work at an institution are doing so in a way that restores dignity to their lives. And so the target that we've placed for ourselves that says we are wanting to eradicate the pit toilet backlogs by March 2025, yes, is an ambitious one. But the reality is that, as you've said in your introduction, is that this has been years in the making. And I've made it quite clear to the department that we no longer can keep pursuing and postponing the deadline for the eradication of pit toilets. We have to put a definite deadline, and we have to hold ourselves to account. Mm-hmm. The president made a similar commitment in his SONA, or the opening address of Parliament this year, when he said at the end of this financial year, we want to see the 4,000 plus schools that have had pit toilets eradicated. Mm-hmm. But I must quickly add here that we will eradicate the backlog of 4,000 plus pit toilets by March. And I expect the department to do so. Mm-hmm. And so I expect provinces to do so.
Pardon me for interjecting there. So having assessed your foot soldiers on the ground within the department, you felt that it's most certainly possible that by March you would have eradicated those pit toilets?
Possible or not, Mfundo, the reality is that I cannot justify a scenario where a learner as young as 6 years old, the learners we have seen, is drowning in a pit toilet in 2024, 30 years after democracy. It's not something that is justifiable. And so I've made it clear to the department that we no longer can prolong this. We have to, if implementing agents, which I must indicate that one of the big problems and the challenges that we have in the system is that the department, of course, it's not its core business to build toilets or bridges or the like, or to build schools. The core business is to learn and provide an environment for learning and teaching. But at the same time, be that as it may, we've got to make sure that schools are a place of safety. And so one of the things I've said to them is that, well, regardless of whatever the challenges are, and the challenges are mainly that we've got implementing agents who do business with the state, with numerous government departments, who are not meeting targets, who are not doing tasks on time. And I've indicated that I would like to bring this matter to Cabinet to say, well, if implementing agents that do government with the state do not live up to commitments that they've made, and the fact that they are being paid for this job, then they should be blacklisted from doing business with the government. Simply put, if we have an issue with a recurring issue with a government implementing agent that just is not doing the work, then we must blacklist them so that they can never do business with the state again. And so I've put this deadline, and I've put my neck on the block to say, well, this is the deadline that we have. But then I want to add very quickly that over and above the over 4,000 pit toilets that was audited in 2018, I would like to have an independent audit after that to make sure that we have a good sense of if there are any remaining pit toilets in the country, number one. Number two, any inappropriate infrastructure in the country, which includes asbestos, any other inappropriate structures, including mud schools, so that we can make sure that we are working with real life data. And
I'm glad that you touch on that. I'm glad that you touch on the conducting of the audit, because it was going to be my next question, that this program is an old one and it was from 2018. The department, when it first launched it, it was called the Sanitation Appropriate for Education or SAFE initiative. And at that time, I remember vividly, it was 3,989 pit toilets. So at this point, you're saying that in as much as you've set a deadline for March next year, you're not necessarily aware of how many pit toilets now still need to be removed.
Well, Mfundo, there are a number of things with that. Number one is that there's maintenance issues. So sometimes alternative sanitation is built in schools, and then schools choose to have pit toilets still present in the school as a backup plan. So we are saying that we want to not only eradicate pit toilets, but we also want to make sure that those ones that have not been demolished or decommissioned are decommissioned. Because if you remember, the last school child who died in a pit toilet in the Eastern Cape died from a pit toilet that actually was decommissioned, that was no longer in use. So we've got to remove those inappropriate infrastructure elements in our schools for safety purposes. But what I'm also saying is that this independent audit will allow us to get real life data. And I've in fact had some productive meetings today with some private partners who are saying they're prepared to come on board to give us a heat map, for instance, where people can geotag inappropriate infrastructure that they can find in their communities. Because of course, I cannot, sitting in Pretoria or in Cape Town, tell you where these things are happening, except when we are partnering with communities that are saying, here's an inappropriate infrastructure, it's geotagged, and immediately that information is fed back to the DBE. And we can say to the province, while we've cleared the backlog, this needs your attention. So I want this to be an interactive process and not one where we say, yes, we've cleared the 4,000 pit toilets in our system, and therefore we are done. Because remember, people are building things as people move, and as migration happens, as overcrowding happens. We have to be a department that is responsive to what people are doing and the people's needs.
Then to the issue of teacher cuts in the Western Cape. We had Satu and Naptosa on the program earlier this week, Minister, and they hold the view that the statement of clarity that was released by the Western Cape, that there will be no retrenchments but rather non-renewal of contracts at the end of the year, is no better. You've got 2,400 contract workers who served a purpose, and now that specific purpose will be added onto the load of the teachers within the system, which will in turn lead to poor teaching and learning.
Undo, the reality here is this. We have, as a country, and I say we in the royal sense, we have, as a country, been making poor policy decisions and poor government priority decisions, where we have funded vanity projects. We have bailed out SOEs when we should have been funding frontline workers. And now in 2024, we sit with the situation where we are feeling the pinch in our frontline workers, where we have to not renew contracts of teachers or police people or people in the healthcare space. The reality is that if government is serious about austerity measures, and this is what I will get into it now, but this is what I have indicated to my colleagues, that I would like to have a sit down with cabinet on behalf of the 9 provinces, not just the Western Cape. The Western Cape is but one province. Remember, all 9 provinces are experiencing budget. They are experiencing a fiscal crisis of some sort, whether it is through either hiring new teachers or keeping teachers or infrastructure or school nutrition, whatever the case may be. They are looking at their budgets and they're saying, over the past 4 or 5 years, we've been underfunded for what we need to do, while the population increases, while we've got an influx of people into these cities and metros in particular. So I would So I convened a meeting of the MECs this morning, where I wanted to get a clear sense of where we are as a country, each province presenting what are the specific fiscal challenges, so that we can go to Treasury with a consolidated plan to say, Treasury, if we are serious about austerity measures, help us save our teachers. Because I cannot simply say here and say to the president in my performance agreement that we are going to be able to improve literacy levels when I'm saying that there's a reduction of educators.
2,400 of those.
Educators are in tandem with the strategy to make sure that we increase literacy levels. And so that is the case I'm going to have to make to cabinet, that as a government, we must make choices. What are we going to do? Are we going to hire more teachers? Are we going to hire more policemen? Or are we going to bail out failing SOEs that have been bailed out for the past 10 years? And so, Mfundo, I'm backing my provinces here. While the MECs don't report to me, they report to the premiers, I'm backing them, because ultimately the budget cuts that have been happening over the years are now starting to impact and have a real life impact on the outcomes of education. And the outcomes of education are ultimately my responsibility. And so that is the case that I would like to make to Treasury in the coming weeks, and I would like to make to Cabinet in the coming weeks.
So just for clarity, there's a possibility that those 2,400 jobs will be saved?
Look, Mfundo, I can't say that for sure, because of course that money doesn't come from DBE. That money comes from Treasury directly to the provinces as part of the equitable share. So the grants that we give to provinces sits with DBE, but compensation of employees sits with the provinces. But the point I'm making is that provinces are saying, yes, we know that we have a fiscal crisis, but there are competing priorities. But I want to make the point and the argument to the government that I'm part of to say, if we're going to do austerity measures, then this is one area we cannot cut on. Because here's the problem that I foresee. The problem is that in order for us to get out of the place that we are in, of low growth, high unemployment, we've got to have a conveyor belt of people who can fill skills in our economy, that can go into the economy, that we can unlock economic opportunities for millions of people. 13.5 million learners are in the system. Those people are looking for jobs in the system. What I cannot do is compromise the quality and the outcome of education because we are experiencing budget cuts, because that has an impact for generations to come. 13.5 million learners depend on the choices that we make today. And so while I don't want to speak on behalf of the Minister of Finance, because I know he is balancing some difficult decisions, but I want to make the argument to my government that, well, it's an untenable situation where we can't have enough educators, because overcrowding undermines the very goal of increasing literacy in South Africa.
Minister, have you engaged SATU, because they seem to have some sort of solution specifically then on the Western Cape matter, because they were of the view that there are certain programs or initiatives, be it the assessment initiatives that are done every year, that could be done away with, as important as they are, but they are of the view that right now, if they are to save jobs and you cannot knock on Treasury's door, that perhaps there needs to be some of that is chipped away. So all the frills would be chipped away for a little bit. Have you engaged SATU perhaps on some of their solutions to this problem?
I would be careful to not label continuous assessment as frills, because I think it's part of the core business of the department, because it speaks directly to the quality of the outcomes of our education system. But the reality is that the provinces are in conversations with the trade unions, and so I have to follow a particular process. And the process here is, as I said, I've convened the 9 MECs. They presented to me what the crisis is. The DBE is now working on basically a presentation that we will take to Treasury, which says this is not just a picture for one province. This is the picture for all 9 provinces. This is what we are looking at if we do not get assistance. And then we take that to Treasury in the next 2 weeks, and we say to Treasury, this is the picture. And of course, trade unions, there are 5 of them that I deal with. There are 5 trade unions, and I will engage with them. But it's good that trade unions at the provincial level are engaging with the provincial departments of education, because it's important. They're an important stakeholder there. And if they are saying, look, there are savings that can be made here, it's up to the MEC to listen and see where cuts can be made. But, Mfundo, I must emphasize this. There can only be so many trims of fat that provinces can make. If the real term budget is decreased over time, we have a problem. Because if they say, yes, we save teacher posts, but we can't do scholar transport, again, that affects the bottom line, outcomes. If they're saying we're saving teacher costs at teacher posts, but we are going to skimp on infrastructure, again, that impacts on outcomes. So this is complicated, but we have to find a solution. And what I've communicated to the MECs this morning is that I'm behind them. I'm behind each and every one of the provinces to say, I will support you in whichever way you can, but with a caveat. And the caveat is this: there cannot be a single province that will send money back to Treasury that is unspent, not when we are facing a crisis of funding the way that we are. And there's been instances where provinces have sent back money to Treasury, and we can't have that again. Whether it's infrastructure, whether it is textbook provisions, whatever it is, that every single province must showcase good financial management, so that when we make the case to Treasury, we can say we've been managing our money well, but we are short because of the fiscal challenges that we face. But what we can't do is manage our money poorly and then go to Treasury and say, Treasury, we need more assistance. So we, as the sector, have to also show up, and we have to do our job. And our job is to make sure that we've got sound financial management, and we spend money as we say we will, and we spend money on the programs that we're meant to spend, but also we spend money prudently. And then we can make a solid case to Treasury, which, as I said, I am intending to say all 9 provinces are my baby, and therefore I'm prepared to make the case to Treasury on their behalf. But we have to get our house in order first.
Minister Gwarube, thank you very much for your time this evening.